Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to our Sunday Bhagavatam series. So we're continuing to read Canto 1 and we began chapter 4 last week, which specifically talks about the appearance of Sri Narada Muni in the life of Srila Vyasadeva because of certain circumstances. So to quickly recap the 5 shlokas that we covered last week, Vyasadeva himself begins by narrating, on hearing Suta Goswami speak thus, Shaunaka Muni, who was the elderly learned leader of all the rishis, engaged in that prolonged sacrificial ceremony, congratulated Suta Goswami by addressing him as follows. Shaunaka said, O Suta Goswami, you are the most fortunate and respected of all those who can speak and recite. Please relate the pious message of Srimad Bhagavatam, which was spoken by the great and powerful sage, Shukadeva Goswami. In what period and at what place was this first begun? And why was this taken up? From where did Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, the great sage, get the inspiration to compile this literature? This literature meaning the Srimad Bhagavatam. His, Vyasadeva's son, was a great devotee, an equibalanced monist whose mind was always concentrated in monism. He was transcendental to mundane activities, but being unexposed, he appeared like an ignorant person. While Sri Vyasadeva was following his son, beautiful young damsels who were bathing naked covered their bodies with cloth, although Srila Vyasadeva himself was not naked. But they had not done so when his son had passed. The sage inquired about this, and the young ladies replied that his son was purified, and when looking at them, made no distinction between male and female, but the sage made such distinctions. So today we'll try to do shlokas 6 to 13. So essentially, the way this chapter can be broken up is that in the first 13 shlokas of this chapter, the Shaunaka Rishi, on behalf of all of the great sages there, Shaunaka Rishi himself was considered to be an exalted personality, but he himself took the humble position of asking Suta Goswami many questions. So he begins by glorifying Suta Goswami, why he is considered to be the perfect person to actually narrate the Srimad Bhagavatam, why he is the perfect person to respond to the questions that the body of rishis have, who are congregated there on the banks of the Naimisharanya. So we'll go further into the questions today, and hopefully we will conclude with Shloka 13, which concludes the number of questions that Shaunaka Rishi will ask of Suta Goswami. So that will bring us to Shloka number 6 of chapter 4 of Bhagavatam Canto 1. Katham alakshitah pauraihi sampraptah guru jangalan unmatta muka jadavat vicharan gaja sahvaye. Word for word meaning, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So the question continues with the word for word meaning. Katham. How. Alakshitaha. Recognized. Pauraihi. By the citizens. Sampraptaha. Reaching. Kuru Jangalan. The Kuru Jangala provinces. Unmatta. Mad. Mukha. Dumb. Jadavat. Stunted. Vicharan. Wandering.
wandering,
Gaja Sahvaye,
Gaja Sahvaye,
Hastinapura.
Hastinapura.
How was he,
How was he,
Srila Shukadeva,
Srila Shukadeva,
the son of Vyasa,
the son of Vyasa,
recognized by the citizens
recognized by the citizens
when he entered the city of Hastinapura,
when he entered the city of Hastinapura,
now Delhi,
now Delhi,
after wandering in the provinces of Kuru and Jangala,
after wandering in the provinces of Kuru and Jangala,
appearing like a madman, dumb and retarded.
appearing like a madman, dumb and retarded.
So Prabhupada explains in the purport, the present city of Delhi was formerly known as Hastinapura because it was first established by King Hasti. Goswami Shukadeva, after leaving his paternal home, who is Goswami Shukadeva's parent? Srila Vyasadeva. So after leaving his paternal home, was roaming like a madman, and therefore it was very difficult for the citizens to recognize him in his exalted position. So by appearance, he seemed to be not to be a holy person, simply by appearance. But Prabhupada writes a very important statement in the next line. A sage is not therefore recognized by sight, but by hearing. How do you recognize a sadhu, a sage, a great personality? When they speak. So you have to hear them speak to recognize that they are a great personality. So one cannot go by looks alone. I was actually listening to Gauranga Darshan Prabhu's lecture before this class, and he was stating that many times, especially in our culture, many great personalities will appear unkempt, uncaring for themselves, and they may act like a madman simply because they don't want to engage with society. So they want to continue with their sadhana so that nobody disturbs them. But until you hear from them, you don't know, you don't recognize their greatness. Therefore, Prabhupada is saying, a sage is not therefore recognized by sight, but by hearing. So you don't recognize a great personality by their clothing. The best indicator is what they speak about. One should approach a sadhu or great sage, not to see, but to hear him. If one is not prepared to hear the words of a sadhu, there is no profit. Prabhupada used to frequently state that many of us will go on Tirtha Yatras. And Prabhupada would state, yeah, you take a dip in a holy river, and you may think all your sins are, diluted into that holy river. But Prabhupada explains the reason we go to a holy place is because in holy places, many sadhus are there. The main purpose of visiting a holy place is to take the association of sadhus, not to take a dip in the river and come back. Therefore, Prabhupada is saying, if one is not prepared to hear the words of a sadhu, there is no profit. Shukadeva Goswami was a sadhu who could speak on the transcendental activities of the Lord. He did not satisfy the whims of ordinary citizens. What do ordinary citizens do when they see a sadhu? They go trouble them and ask them, give me this blessing. Please bless my son. Please bless my daughter. Please bless me. That is what they are most interested in. They are not interested in hearing the sadhu speak Shastra. They just want blessings. So that is our misfortune. So Shukadeva Goswami was a sadhu who could speak on the transcendental activities of the Lord. He did not satisfy the whims of ordinary citizens. He was recognized when he spoke on the subject of Bhagavatam, and he never attempted jugglery like a magician. Outwardly, he appeared to be a retarded, dumb madman, but in fact, he was the most elevated transcendental personality. Which explains why when Shukadev Goswami begins to speak the Srimad Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj, all the sages were gathered there, including his own father, Srila Vyasadeva, and many great personalities like Suta Goswami, who happened to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam directly from the lips of the great personality, Shukadev Goswami. So the question that Shravanaka Rishi has asked is, how was this great personality received in a huge city like Hastinapura? Because he was actually appearing like a madman. So did the citizens really recognize him as a great personality? So that brings us to shloka number 7. Katham va pandave yasya
Katham va pandave yasya
rajarsher munina saha
rajarsher munina saha
samvada samabhutata
samvada samabhutata
yatraisha satvati shrutihi
yatraisha satvati shrutihi.
katham.
Katham.
How is it?
How is it?
Va.
Va.
Also.
Also.
Pandave yasya.
Pandave yasya.
Of the descendant of Pandu.
Of the descendant of Pandu.
Parikshit.
Parikshit.
Rajarshehe.
Rajarshehe.
Of the king who was a sage.
Of the king who was a sage.
Munina.
Munina.
With the Muni.
With the Muni.
Saha.
Saha.
With. Samvadaha.
Samvadaha.
Discussion. Samabhut. Took place. Tata. Oh darling. Yatra. Whereupon. Esha. Like this. Satvati. Transcendental. Shrutihi. Essence of the Vedas. How did it so happen that King Parikshit met this great sage, making it possible for this great transcendental essence of the Vedas, Bhagavatam, to be sung to him? So the question is, what was the circumstance under which the Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken? Srimad Bhagavatam is stated here as the essence of the Vedas. It is not an imaginary story as it is sometimes considered by unauthorized men. It is also called Shuka Samhita, or the Vedic hymn spoken by Sri Shukadeva Goswami, the great liberated sage. That brings us to shloka number 8. Sagodohanamatram hi griheshu grahamedhinam avekshate mahabhagah tirthikurvam stadashramam saha he Shukadeva Goswami Godohana only for the time of milking the cow. He certainly Griheshu in the house Grihamedhinam
Griha Medhinam,
the householders.
of the householders.
Avekshate,
Avekshate,
waits.
waits.
Mahabhagaha, the
Mahabhagha,
most fortunate.
the most fortunate.
Tirthi,
Tirthi,
pilgrimage.
pilgrimage.
Kurvan,
Kurvan,
transforming.
transforming.
Tat ashramam,
Tat ashramam,
the residence.
residence.
Translation. He, Shukadeva Goswami,
He, Shukadev Goswami,
was accustomed to stay at the door of a householder
was accustomed to stay at the door of a householder
only long enough for a cow to be milked.
only long enough for a cow to be milked.
And he did this
And he did this
just to sanctify the residence.
just to sanctify the residence.
Prabhupada writes, Shukadeva Goswami met Emperor Parikshit and explained the text of Srimad Bhagavatam. He was not accustomed to stay at any householder's residence for more than half an hour at the time of milking the cow. And he would just take alms from the fortunate householder. That was to sanctify the residence by his auspicious presence. So when sadhus come knocking on your door and ask for bhiksha, and if you happen to be the most fortunate householder to give them bhiksha, then the householder is actually being benefited. Although it seems like the sadhu is the one who's benefiting because he's the one who's begging. But it is actually the grihastha, the householder, who's being benefited by the presence of a pious person. Therefore, Shukadeva Goswami is an ideal preacher established in the transcendental position. From his activities, those who are in the renounced order of life and dedicated to the mission of preaching the message of Godhead should learn that they have no business with householders save and except to enlighten them in transcendental knowledge. So why does a sannyasi not stay too long in one place? One is they should not get used and comfortable in that place. Two is their whole purpose of studying the scriptures is to help bring this knowledge to others so that others may be benefited from it. Therefore, a sannyasi has no business with the household. Their only duty is to propagate this Krishna consciousness. Such asking for alms from the householder should be for the purpose of sanctifying his home. One who is in the renounced order of life should not be allured by the glamour of the householder's worldly possessions and thus become subservient to worldly men. Another reason why sannyasis don't stay in one house or don't stay even in one place for too long. Because they should not be contaminated by the grihastha's way of life. So they have to stay detached. For one who is in the renounced order of life, this is much more dangerous than drinking poison and committing suicide. Prabhupada himself took sannyas, although at a very advanced age, when he was past 50 years old. Prabhupada is saying for a sannyasi to stay in a grihastha's house for more than half an hour, as in the time it takes to milk a cow, is actually very dangerous. Even more dangerous than actually harming your own body or even committing suicide. That is how strict a sannyasi should be. There is a nice pastime in Charitamrita where the Lord, King Prataparudra, wants to meet the Lord in Puri. But the Lord refuses time and again because he recognizes that even interacting with the king could be quite dangerous. So even Prataparudra, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu kept at a great distance from him. So this is the ways of pious personalities, very exalted personalities. They are very detached from everything. That brings us to the question in shloka number 9. Abhimanyu sutam suta
Abhimanyu Suta
Rahur Bhagavatottamam
Prahurbhagavatomam
Tasya Janma Mahaschariyam
Tasya Janma Mahascharyam
Karmani Chagrinihinah.
Karmani Chagrinihinaha
Abhimanyu Sutam,
Abhimanyu Sutam,
the son of Abhimanyu.
the son of Abhimanyu.
Suta,
Suta,
O Suta,
O Suta,
Prahuhu
Prahuhu
is said to be
is said to be
Bhagavata Uttamam,
Bhagavata Uttamam,
the first class devotee of the Lord.
the first class devotee of the Lord.
Tasya,
Tasya
his
is
Janma,
Janma,
birth,
birth,
Maha Ascharyam,
Maha Ashcharyam,
very wonderful.
very wonderful.
Karmani,
Karmani,
activities.
activities.
Cha,
Cha
and
and
Grinihi,
Grinihi,
please speak to.
please speak to
Naha,
Naha,
us.
us.
Translation. It is said
It is said
that Maharaj Parikshit
that Maharaj Parikshit
is a great first-class devotee of the Lord,
is a great first-class devotee of the Lord,
and that his birth and activities are all wonderful.
and that his birth and activities are all wonderful.
Please tell us about him.
Please tell us about him.
So this begins a new subsection of the first 13 shlokas where the questions are being asked. In the section that we just completed, actually from shloka 4 to shloka 8, the questions are about Shukadev Goswami. So Shaunaka Rishi has asked specific questions about the speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam. Now from shlokas 9 to 12, the questions are about the person listening to Srimad Bhagavatam from Shukadev Goswami, who is Parikshit Maharaj. The birth of Maharaj Parikshit is wonderful because in the womb of his mother, he was protected by the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. His activities are also wonderful because he chastised Kali, who was attempting to kill a cow. So everybody seems to know who is Parikshit Maharaj. His birth, his appearance itself was transcendental. Imagine the Lord entering the womb to protect a child. So something would have been very, very special about this personality. So not only was his appearance, birth, extremely transcendental, his activities were also transcendental. He was not afraid to chastise Kali because Kali Yuga had begun. And Kali, the personality Kali makes an appearance to indicate that the degradation of this fourth Yuga has begun. And how did that degradation begin? With this personality of Kali trying to kill a cow. To kill cows means to end human civilization. I'll read it again. To kill cows means to end human civilization. He wanted to protect the cow from being killed by the great representative of sin. His death is also wonderful because he got previous notice of his death, which is wonderful for any mortal being. His birth was wonderful, his activities were wonderful, his death was glorious. And thus he prepared himself for passing away by sitting down on the banks of the Ganges and hearing the transcendental activities of the Lord. So our Shastras say that anybody who's engaged in the cycle of killing a cow, the number of hair that is there on a cow, that many times you have to take birth and be punished. Therefore, cow killing is not sanctioned in Vedic culture. So if one person kills a cow, they have to take birth and be punished as many hair as there is on that one cow. Hence, Prabhupada is saying to kill a cow means to end human civilization. So anyway, there is a glorification of Parikshit Maharaj here by Prabhupada in the purport. During all the days he heard Bhagavatam, he did not take food or drink, nor did he sleep a moment. So everything about him is wonderful. And his activities are worth hearing attentively. The desire is expressed herein to hear about him in detail. This is why great personalities, we are so interested in hearing about their life, because their life and their decisions, their dedication to their duties and responsibilities, yet their detachment from all things, from all kinds of opulences is also so attractive. And by hearing about great personalities, we also get purified, right? So that was Parikshit Maharaj. His birth was wonderful. His activities were wonderful. His death was most glorious. He was completely duty bound, yet he was completely detached. When he heard that he was going to die in a matter of 7 days, he just gave up his kingdom. He could have done a counter curse to Shringi, but he did not. He accepted it as a will of the Lord. Therefore, he prepared himself to hear Srimad Bhagavatam from the most wonderful personality, Shukadeva Goswami. Which brings us to the next question, which is in Shloka number 10. Okay. Sasamrat kasya va hetoh
Samrat kasya va yeto
Pandunam manavardhanah
Pandunam manavardhanah
Prayopavishto gangayam
Rayo pavishto gangayam
Anadritya dhirat shriyam.
Anadrityat dhirat shriyam
Saha,
Saha
he, Samrat,
Samrat,
the emperor,
the emperor,
Kasya,
Kasya,
for what?
for what?
Va,
Va,
or, hetoho,
yetoho,
reason,
reason,
Pandunam,
Pandunam,
of the sons of Pandu,
of the sons of Pandu,
Manavardhanaha,
Manavardhanaha,
one who enriches the family,
one who enriches the family,
Praya upavishtaha,
Praya upavishtaha,
sitting and fasting,
sitting and fasting,
Gangayam,
Gangayam,
on the banks of the Ganges,
on the bank of the Ganges,
Anadritya,
Anadritya,
neglecting,
neglecting,
Adhirat,
Adhirat,
acquired kingdom,
acquired kingdom,
Shriyam,
Shriyam,
opulences.
opulences.
Translation. He was a great emperor.
He was a great emperor
And possessed all the opulences of his acquired kingdom.
and possessed all the opulences of his acquired kingdom.
He was so exalted.
He was so exalted
That he was increasing the prestige of the Pandu dynasty.
that he was increasing the prestige of the Pandu dynasty.
Why did he give up everything?
Why did he give up everything?
To sit down on the bank of the Ganges and fast until death.
to sit down on the bank of the Ganges and fast until death?
So in these two shlokas, which is shloka number 10 and the next shloka, the question that is being asked is, how did Parikshit Maharaj be in that mood of renunciation? You know, if you're a king, you may be attached to your kingdom, to your wealth, to your opulences, to the grandeur, to respect, to love, to adulation. And yet he was so detached, he just walked away. So not only were the Pandavas great devotees of the Lord, exalted personalities. So even Parikshit Maharaj inherited those godly qualities from the Pandavas. He inherited a great kingdom. He not only did all of this, but he increased the prestige of the Pandava dynasty. So if he was so successful at everything that he did, how did he just give up everything? So Prabhupada writes, Maharaj Parikshit was the emperor of the world and all the seas and oceans. And he did not have to take the trouble to acquire such a kingdom by his own effort. He inherited it from his grandfathers, Maharaja, Yudhishthira, and brothers. Besides that, he was doing well in the administration and was worthy of the good names of his forefathers. So he didn't rest his laurels on the greatness of his grandfathers. He worked equally hard to continue the good administration. And therefore he earned his name as a great emperor. Consequently, there was nothing undesirable in his opulence and administration. Then why should he give up all these favorable circumstances and sit down on the bank of the Ganges fasting till death? After all, he was a king. Why should he accept the curse of a Brahmana? Therefore, this the sages in Naimisharanya found quite astonishing. How can a successful king, a young king, just give up everything? This is astonishing, and therefore all were eager to know the cause. What caused Parikshit Maharaj to give up all of this in just an instant? Such a great renunciate he was. That brings us to shloka number 11. Namanti yat padaniketamātmanah
Namanti yat padaniketam atmanah
Shivaya haniya dhanani shatravaha
Shivaya haniya dhanani shatravah
Atham savira shriyam angadustyajam
Katam savira shriyam angastustyajam
Yuvaishatot shashtumaho sahasubhihi
Yuvaishato shrashtum aho saha subhihi
Namanti,
Namanti,
bow down.
bow down.
Yat pada,
Yat pada,
whose feet.
whose feet.
Niketam,
Niketam,
under.
under.
Atmanaha,
Atmanaha,
own.
own.
Shivaya,
Shivaya,
welfare.
welfare.
Haniya,
Aniya,
used to bring about.
used to bring about.
Dhanani,
Dhanani,
wealth.
wealth.
Shatravaha,
Chatravaha,
enemies.
enemies.
Katham,
Katham,
for what reason?
for what reason?
Saha,
Saha,
he.
he.
Veeraha,
Veeraha,
the chivalrous.
chivalrous.
Shriyam,
Triyam,
opulences.
opulences.
Anga,
Anga,
O Suta Goswami,
O Suta Goswami,
Dustyajam,
Dustyajam,
insuperable,
insuperable,
Yuva,
Yuva,
in full youth,
in full youth,
Aishata,
Aishata,
desired,
desire,
Utsrashtum,
Uthrashtum,
to give up,
to give up,
Aho,
Aho,
exclamation,
exclamation,
Saha,
Saha,
with,
with,
Asubhihi,
Asubihi,
life,
life.
translation. He was such a great emperor
He was such a great emperor
that all his enemies
that all his enemies
would come and bow down at his feet
would come down and bow down at his feet
and surrender all their wealth
and surrender all their wealth
for their own benefit.
for their own benefit.
He was full of youth and strength,
He was full of youth and strength,
and he possessed kingly opulences
and he possessed kingly opulences
that were difficult to give up.
that were difficult to give up.
Why did he want to give up everything, including his life?
Why did he want to give up everything, including his life?
So it is said that when the king is sitting on the throne, his feet are placed on a stool, and other kings would come and bow down and touch their head to that little stool that was placed. Such was the characteristic of a great king like Parikshit. There was nothing undesirable in his life. He was quite a young man and could enjoy life with power and opulence. So there was no question of retiring from active life. Parikshit was not an old man. He was a young king. There was no difficulty in collecting the state taxes because he was so powerful and chivalrous that even his enemies would come to him and bow down at his feet and surrender all wealth for their own benefit. When you know you're under the rulership of a great king, of a pious king, of a judicious king, then you voluntarily start paying taxes for your own benefit. Maharaj Parikshit was a pious king. He conquered his enemies, and therefore the kingdom was full of prosperity. There was enough milk, grains, and metals, and all the rivers and mountains were full of potency. A good way to judge the success of an administration is the production of natural things, The rivers, the mountains, everything was just wonderful. So materially, everything was satisfactory. Therefore, there was no question of untimely giving up his kingdom and life. The sages were eager to hear about all this. So questions 10 and 11 dealt with the mood of renunciation of Maharaj Parikshit, even though he was young, even though he was a judicious king, he need not have accepted the curse of that young Brahmana boy. Yet he accepted it as the will of the Lord. So they are simply astounded that such a young person who may be so attached to the kingdom, who may be enjoying being in that role as a king, as an emperor, they are not able to understand how someone like this just gives it up. That means he must be a very detached person. That brings us to shloka number 12. Shivaya lokasya bhavaya bhutaye
Shivaya lokasya bhavaya bhutaye
ya uttama shloka parayana jana
ye uttama shloka parayana janah
jivanti natmarthamasau parashrayam
Jivanti natmartham asau parashrayam
mumocha nirvidya kutah kalevaram
Mumocha nirvidya kutha kalevaram.
Okay. Shivaya,
Shivaya,
welfare.
welfare.
Lokasya,
Lokasya,
of all living beings.
of all living beings.
Bhavaya,
Bhavaya,
for flourishing.
for flourishing.
Bhutaye,
Bhuthaye,
for economic development.
for economic development.
Ye,
Ye,
one who is.
one who is.
Uttama shloka parayanaha,
Uttama shloka parayanaha,
devoted to the cause of the personality of Godhead.
devoted to the cause of the personality of Godhead.
Janaha,
Janaha,
men.
men.
Jivanti,
Jivanti,
do live.
do live.
Na,
Na,
but not.
but not.
Atma artham,
Atma artham,
selfish interest.
selfish interest.
Asau,
Asav,
that.
that.
Para ashrayam,
Para ashrayam,
shelter for others.
shelter for others.
Mumocha,
Mumocha,
gave up.
gave up.
Nirvidya,
Nirvidya,
being freed from all attachment.
being freed from all attachment.
Kutaha,
Kutaha,
for what reason?
for what reason?
Kalevaram,
Kalevaram,
mortal body.
mortal body.
Translation, those who are devoted to the cause of the personality of Godhead
Those who are devoted to the cause of the personality of Godhead
live only for the welfare, development, and happiness of others.
live only for the welfare, development, and happiness of others.
They do not live for any selfish interest.
They do not live for any selfish interest.
So even though the Emperor Parikshit
So even though the Emperor Parikshit
was free from all attachment to worldly possessions,
was free from all attachment to worldly possessions,
how could he give up his mortal body,
how could he give up his mortal body,
which was the shelter for others?
which was the shelter for others?
Very nice question. When there is a great personality, then that great personality should continue in their service for the benefit of the larger humanity. So the emperorship of Parikshit was such that it was benefiting the whole of society. The question was, why should such a great person, whose very life is benefiting the rest of society, why should he give up his duty and responsibility? When his very presence was indeed necessary for the functioning of a good society. So that was a very intelligent question. Prabhupada writes, Parikshit Maharaj was an ideal king and householder. Why? Because he was a devotee of the personality of Godhead. A devotee of the Lord automatically has all good qualifications. And the emperor was a typical example of this. Personally, he had no attachment for all the worldly opulences in his possession. But since he was king, for the all-round welfare of his citizens, he was always busy in the welfare work of the public, not only for this life, but also for the next. He himself was personally detached from all material things, but at the same time, he kept himself busy for the good of his citizens. He would not allow slaughterhouses or killing of cows. He was not a foolish and partial administrator who would arrange for the protection of one living being and allow another to be killed. Prabhupada writes in some of his commentary and purports that when a king rules or an emperor rules, all Jivatma become his subjects. So an emperor cannot prioritize and say, only human beings I will protect. They are my primary responsibility. Everybody else are secondary. That is not the mood of a king. A pious king, definitely not a mood of the devotee of the Lord. So even animals and birds come under the protection of the king because they are also considered to be citizens. Because he was a devotee of the Lord, he knew perfectly well how to conduct his administration for everyone's happiness. Men, animals, plants, and all living creatures. He was not selfishly interested. Selfishness is either self-centered or self-extended. He was neither. Self-centered means I, me, mine. Self-extended means you only think about your kingdom, your citizens, your society, etc. He was neither. His interest was to please the supreme truth, the personality of Godhead. A devotee's very existence, their very life breath is used to serve the Supreme Lord. They live for that. They don't live to accumulate things for themselves. Initially, Arjuna said, this is my body. I will use my body to protect my family. Therefore, I will not fight. So Krishna had to tell him, your body belongs to me, and therefore it should be used in my service. And if fighting and killing your own family members is done in my service, then that is a topmost devotee. So a devotee lives to please the Supreme. The king is the representative of the Supreme Lord, and therefore the king's interest must be identical with that of the Supreme Lord. So the king's will must be aligned with the will of the Supreme. So that means the king always sees himself as the servant of the Supreme Lord. He doesn't think, I am the king, I am the greatest, and therefore I can do what I want. The Supreme Lord wants all living beings to be obedient to him and thereby become happy. Therefore, the king's interest is to guide all subjects back to the kingdom of God. This is a very important statement that we have to understand. Prabhupada makes a similar statements in the Bhagavad Gita as well. What is the king's primary responsibility? Is to create an atmosphere in which the Jivatmas can practice spirituality without worrying about whether there is sufficient food, grains, adequate shelter, adequate wealth, etc. That all these things come with such ease that the Jivatma is able to spend majority of their life in becoming a devotee of the Lord. That is the king's primary responsibility. His responsibility is to take the citizens back to the spiritual world. That is the duty of the king. Therefore, the king's interest is to guide all subjects back to the kingdom of God. Hence, the activities of the citizens should be so coordinated that they can at the end go back home, back to Godhead. That is the primary duty of a king. Under the administration of a representative king, representative means he is a representative of the Supreme Lord. The kingdom is full of opulence. At that time, human beings need not eat animals. There are ample food, grains, milk, fruit, and vegetables, so that the human beings as well as the animals can eat sumptuously and to their heart's content. If all living beings are satisfied with food and shelter and obeyed the prescribed rules, there cannot be any disturbance between one living being and another. Emperor Parikshit was a worthy king, and therefore all were happy during his reign. So because he was the king, everybody was satisfied. So the question that was asked is, why did he have to give it up? Because the citizens were satisfied. They were practicing spirituality. So what was the need for Maharaj Parikshit to give up his kingdom prematurely when everything was going so well? That was the question that was being asked. Which brings us to the last shloka for the day, which is shloka number 13. Tatsarvam na samachakshva
Tatsarvam nah samachakshva
prishto yadiha kinchana
prishto yadiha kinchana
manye tvam vishaye vacham
manye tvam vishaye vacham
snatamanyatra chandasat
natamanyatra chandasat.
tat,
That
that sarvam,
sarvam,
all,
all,
naha,
naha,
unto us, samachakshva,
samachakshva,
clearly explain, prishtaha,
prishtaha,
questioned,
yat iha,
herein,
kinchana,
all that, manye, we think, tvam, you, vishaye, in all subjects, vacham, meanings of words, snatam, fully acquainted, anyatra, except chandasat, portion of the Vedas. Translation. We know that you are expert in the meaning of all subjects.
We know that you are expert in the meaning of all subjects.
Except some portions of the Vedas. And thus you can clearly explain the answers to all the questions we have just put to you. So the questions are done. So Shaunaka Rishi is concluding by saying, my dear Sutta Goswami, you are the most appropriate person to answer all these questions because you know all the answers. How do you know all the answers? Because you are a great student of the subject matter. Prabhupada writes, the difference between the Vedas and the Puranas is like that between the Brahmanas and the Paribrajakas. Paribrajaka means somebody who travels all the time, usually a sannyasi who's traveling from place to place for the purpose of preaching. As part of that title, they will have the name Paribrajakacharya. The Brahmanas are meant to administer some fruitive sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas. But the Parivrajakacharyas or learned preachers are meant to disseminate transcendental knowledge to one and all. I don't remember in which class I was covering this, but among the four Varnas, the Brahmanas are considered to be topmost. But if you combine the Varna and Ashrama, the sannyasi is considered to be higher than a Brahmana. What is the Brahmana's purpose? Well, there are two kinds of Brahmanas. Prabhupada explains that later in Canto 10 of Srimad Bhagavatam, when the wives of the Brahmanas want to see the Lord, but the Brahmanas prevent them from going to see the Lord and serving the Lord. At that time, in one of the shlokas, I don't recall which shloka it is, but Prabhupada writes that there is a difference between, there are two kinds of Brahmanas actually. The Brahmanas that are called Vipras, are those who are well versed in the Karmakanda section of the Vedas, and therefore their primary duty is to help other householders get what they want through various kind of sacrifices. Is in the sense to get the material benefits, provided you follow the instructions of the Vedic scriptures. And then there is another category, the real Brahmanas are those who are actually students of the Vedic scriptures, who are focused on self-realization. So even among Brahmanas, there are two categories. But higher than Brahmanas, Prabhupada is explaining, are the Parivrajakacharyas. They are learned preachers and they are meant to disseminate transcendental knowledge to one and all. As such, the Parivrajakacharyas are not always expert in pronouncing the Vedic mantras, which are practiced systematically by accent and meter by the Brahmanas, who are meant for administering Vedic rites. So I was actually hearing an explanation of this from a senior Vaishnava. When you want to get the benefits of performing the various kind of sacrifices to get certain material benefits, the pronunciation of the mantra has to be absolutely perfect to get you the results that you need. Therefore, singing the mantra in the right meter, in the right tune, pronouncing the mantra perfectly decides whether you get the benefit or not. But for those who are occupied with preaching to others, this kind of mandate of having perfect pronunciation is not necessary, because you are dealing with the transcendental subject matter. So even for us, the recitation of shlokas, it's not necessary for it to be perfect. Is it nice if it is nice, if it is done nicely? Yes. Because we are talking about transcendental subject matters, the recitation of the shlokas, the perfection, the pitch, the meter, do not hold that much importance for someone who is preaching. But for someone who is helping others achieve their goals, their material goals, through the performance of sacrifices, the Brahmana that is actually helping you do various samskaras, for them, pronunciation is absolutely important. If you mispronounce something, you will lose the benefits. Therefore, the entire thing will be a waste of time. But then, in this day and age, which householder knows that which Brahmana is actually reciting everything nicely? We don't know. Therefore, Prabhupada says, simply chant Hare Krishna, and that is more than sufficient. As such, the Parivrajakacharyas are not always expert in pronouncing the Vedic mantras. Why is Prabhupada writing this? Because Shaunaka Rishi is saying that, my dear Sutta Goswami, you are an expert on transcendental subject matters. Yet there are certain portions of the Vedas you are not an expert on, which is the Karmakanda section. And anyway, we are not interested in that section. We are interested in the transcendental subject matters. So as such, the Parivrajakacharyas are not always expert in pronouncing the Vedic mantras, which are practiced systematically by accent and meter by the Brahmanas, who are meant for administering Vedic rites. Yet it should not be considered that the Brahmanas are more important than the itinerant preachers. Itinerant means somebody who's always traveling. They are one and different simultaneously because they are meant for the same end in different ways. There's no difference also between the Vedic mantras and what is explained in the Puranas and the Itihasas. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, it is mentioned in the Madhyandina Shruti, that all the Vedas, namely the Sama, Atharva, Rig, Yajur, Puranas, Itihasas, Upanishads, etc., are emanations from the breathing of the Supreme Being. It is the breath of the Supreme Lord that comes out as these various sounds, which are captured as words and sentences in various scriptures. The only difference is that the Vedic mantras are mostly begun with the pranava omkara. And it requires some training to practice the metric pronunciation of the Vedic mantras. But that does not mean that Srimad Bhagavatam is of less importance than the Vedic mantras. On the contrary, it is the ripened fruit of all the Vedas, as stated before. Besides that, the most perfectly liberated soul, Srila Shukadeva Goswami, is absorbed in the studies of the Bhagavatam, although he is already self-realized. So even when you are self-realized, these great personalities are still reading and relishing the Bhagavatam. They don't need any more knowledge because they already know everything. But still they go back to Nigamator Kalpa Phalam, Galitam. They enjoy this rasa of reading the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Sutta Goswami is following his footsteps, and therefore his position is not the least less important, because he was not expert in chanting Vedic mantras with metric pronunciation, which depends more on practice than actual realization. Realization is more important than parrot-like chanting. A very important statement for devotees to understand. Devotees are also attracted to nice chanting, to nice recitation. But Prabhupada is writing, what is more important for devotees? Realization. And His Grace Gauranga Darshan Prabhu was saying, what is the circuit that connects and completes input to output? Input is the knowledge. The circuit is seva, and output is realization. Without seva, you will not get realizations. Because then input will just be theory. That means sadhana, practicing what you are learning and serving the Supreme Lord completes that circuit so that you achieve that state of realization. So realization will come when you put into practice what you are hearing. So input is knowledge, the circuit is seva, and output is realization. And that completes the cycle for a devotee. Otherwise, we will be forever stuck in theoretical knowledge. We will never ever go beyond it. So to go deeper into the Shastra, seva is important. And seva performed in the association of other devotees helps you make progress on the spiritual path much faster. Seva under the guidance of a bona fide guru helps you achieve realizations much faster. That is why Prabhupada is emphasizing in this particular purport that, yeah, while chanting is important and necessary, specifically for the purposes of achieving certain material benefits, it is not necessary for the purposes of realization. So your chanting of these shlokas need not be perfect, but your realization may be perfect because you're engaged in seva to the Supreme Lord, seva to Guru, and seva to Sadhu and Shastra. So with this, we conclude the section from Shloka 1 to Shloka 13, which looked at all the questions posed by Shaunaka Rishi on behalf of all of the other great sages who are gathered there at Naimisharanya. And these questions were posed to the personality known as Sutta Goswami.